Hey everyone, welcome back to Lo-Fi Apocrypha, where we talk about things that aren't that deep until they actually are. I'm your host, Mom Chalan, and today we're talking about one of the most profound pieces of wisdom humanity has ever produced. Touch grass. Now, normally when someone tells you to touch grass, it's not a compliment. It usually means log off, calm down, please go interact with something that isn't a comment section on Reddit. And honestly, I have a story about how a few weeks ago, I found myself thinking exactly that. I found myself down a rabbit hole because of a new God of War announcement made by Sony during State of Play. I've never played the game. I know the lore, but I'm not a fan. And yet I spent 2 hours reading the comment section. Big mistake. I walked away feeling miserable, and I realized, wait, someone told me to touch grass because I was getting heated over a comment section. And that insult hit harder than it should have. Okay, so tell me why, right? Tell me why this new installment isn't even launching till 2027, and the finer details haven't even been discussed. And there hasn't even been a test drive demo situation of the dang game, and yet the interwebs has collectively lost their minds over the fact that the protagonist isn't big old boy Kratos anymore, but rather his wife, Faye. The audacity of swapping roles turned the comments section into Crash Out Central. Now, I'm not here to dissect if this reaction is misogynistic or if games are becoming too quote-unquote woke. Honestly, that's a whole ass can of nonsense. I do not have the energy for today. What I'm interested in is the nuclear reaction itself. Why does the mere mention of a POV shift send people into a spiral? Why is the internet so incredibly fragile when it comes to the identity of a digital character? Everyone was accusing everyone else of ruining a game that isn't even on the market yet. What are we doing? And I remember staring at my phone thinking, we as a society should not be allowed Wi-Fi right now. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized something hella weird. For a phrase we use mostly as an insult, touch grass might actually be ancient spiritual advice. Chapter 1. The Problem with Extremes. One thing I noticed about internet culture is how quickly everything becomes an emergency. Everything is either the greatest thing ever or civilization is collapsing. There's no middle. No patience, no uncertainty, just immediate knee-jerk reactions and crash outs because Kratos isn't front and center in the new game. We think this is a modern problem, but humans have been doing this for thousands of years. Which brings us to a prince in ancient India who had the exact same issue. Chapter 2. Siddhartha's Two Bad Ideas. A lot of people know the Buddha as that enlightened guy sitting under a tree. What people sometimes forget is that before enlightenment, Siddhartha spent years trying absolutely everything else. First came luxury. He grew up as the peak poster child of privilege, protected from suffering, insulated from hardship and from reality. And when he saw illness and suffering for the first time, it totally rocked his ass because it permanently shifted his very narrow, very unrealistic worldview. And what do people usually do when confronted with something that upends their framework? If you guessed Crash Out, then congratulations, you're right, but you win nothing. And that was the same thing for Siddhartha. He decided to go to the deep end, very literally, and do balls to the wall, total deprivation of everything he'd ever known. Extreme asceticism, extreme self-denial, complete nothingness. And to nobody's surprise except his, it didn't work. At one point, he was so emaciated, he was actively dying. And it took a bit, but Siddhartha arrived at a realization that sounds super obvious until you actually try living it. Extremes get you nowhere. Not indulgence, not self-destruction. You need something in between. The middle way. Chapter 3. Mara, Slanesh, and the problem of just one more. In Buddhist tradition, enlightenment isn't achieved without resistance. So enter this one old boy named Mara, the tempter, the deceiver, the embodiment of attachment, illusion, distraction, and inordinate desire. Mara's goal wasn't simply to tempt Siddhartha. It was to keep him reacting, to keep him chasing fear, desire, anger, pride, anything that would get in the way from him seeing reality clearly. Because as long as Siddhartha stayed caught up in the next emotion, the next distraction, the next high, the next impulse, he would never really find peace. And honestly, if you're a Warhammer fan, you're already pretty familiar with Mara's energy. It's Slanesh, the chaos god of excess. Now, before anyone starts writing angry comments, no, I'm not saying Slanesh and Mara are the same thing. I'm saying they represent a similar temptation. They share the same lethal trap. The belief that fulfillment is always just one more step away. One more sensation, one more achievement, one more argument, one more victory, one more scroll, one more notification, one more discourse, and one more crumb of online discourse to get pissed off about. The promise is always more. But Siddhartha noticed satisfaction never arrived, and I'm sure you caught that too. Chapter 4. So how does Mara and Buddha and Slanesh and Kratos all come into play with the insult of touch grass? Well, it took Siddhartha around 7 weeks to come to the conclusion that maybe peace, truth, and enlightenment can be best achieved with balance instead of extremes. Remember, he oscillated between straight-up, no-chaser extremes of luxury and poverty, and turned up with nada enchilada for his troubles. The night before an emaciated Siddhartha figured out the middle way was when Mara decided he wanted to be a problem. Mara had watched him struggle to find just the right equation for truth, and he wasn't having it. So Mara threw everything he had at Siddhartha: fear, violence, desire, illusion. Now, if this were an anime, we'd be about 4 seasons deep into the final boss fight by now. Every distraction imaginable was placed in front of him, not because Mara cared what Siddhartha chose, but because as long as he kept reacting, he'd never actually become free. So what did Siddhartha do to let Mara know he wasn't buying what he was selling? There was no grand speech or dramatic gestures, and very disappointingly, no concentrated aura that manifested into fireballs. So yeah, how did Siddhartha defeat the demon, tempting him with literally every distraction imaginable? He touched grass. No, really, he actually did. Siddhartha leaned forward beneath the Bodhi tree and placed his open palms on the earth. Rather than telling Mara to kick rocks, Siddhartha grounded himself in reality. He wasn't trying to win an argument. He wasn't trying to out-drama the demon. He simply returned to what was true, what was real, and what was directly in front of him. Part 5. The Internet and Main Character Syndrome. And that's why I think touch grass is less of a modern insult and more of an eternal reminder, because the Internet rewards exactly the opposite behavior. It rewards immediacy, outrage, absolute certainty 5 minutes after a 2027 game trailer drops. The middle way asks us to practice something much more difficult. Patience, attention, the willingness to admit that maybe we don't have enough information yet to form a worthwhile opinion. And for a lot of us, that's harder than fighting demons. When you're spiraling over a 2027 game announcement or doom scrolling until your eyes bleed, you're not engaging with reality. You're engaging with Mara, you're feeding Slanesh. touch grass isn't just you being read to filth. It's an ancient, profound, and deeply existential instruction to get your hands off the screen and get back onto the ground. So next time someone tells you to do it, don't crash out. Take it as a challenge to reach your own little version of peace. Conclusion. Maybe touching grass isn't really about grass or about insults. Maybe it's about remembering that reality exists outside our own heads, outside algorithms, outrage cycles, and comment sections. The opposite of wisdom isn't always ignorance. Sometimes it's obsession, the inability to stop, to let go and take a step back. The refusal to pause long enough to ask whether our first reaction deserves to become our final conclusion. So the next time you find yourself spiraling over fandom drama, politics, lore debates, or whatever fresh hell that Materium has launched into real space this week, maybe don't ask, how do I win this argument? Maybe ask, have I spent more time reacting than reflecting? And if the answer is yes, then maybe it really is time to touch some grass. Thanks for hanging out with me. This has been Mom Chalan, and I'll talk to y'all again soon. Bye!